Bonne soirée à tous et bienvenue à cette rencontre du comité de dérogation pour la Ville d'Ottawa. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. Before I go any further, I just want to make sure that I'm being heard. Everybody can, I'm clear and okay, good to know. I am trying out new headphones and have been playing around with the audio settings. So I just want to make sure that I've made myself completely hearable, I guess, at this point. So my name is Anne Tremblay, and I am the chair of panel 2. And with me this evening are my fellow colleagues, Mr. Scott Hindle, Ms. Kathleen Willis, and Ms. Julia Markovich. Mr. White is going to join us. We were speaking with him earlier, so we know he's around. So I'm sure he'll join us in just a few minutes. So just to those that this may be your first time with the Committee of Adjustment. So the Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body, and we're appointed by City Council to essentially make decisions on certain types of applications. And specifically, we're talking about minor variances, consents, and there's a few other less well-known authorities that we do have under the Planning Act, but generally speaking, we hear an awful lot of applications with regards to consents and minor variances. So also want to make a few remarks about the committee's jurisdiction. So for the most part, the committee is very much a narrow focus. So we can't really get into issues that have anything to do with aspects that are outside of what the application actually calls for. So if we're dealing with very simple minor variances or consent, we really need to stick with what that is. And a consent may or may not mean that there's development that's attached to it. And if we are dealing with simply with a consent, then we need to deal with the aspects that relate to that. We also don't get into property value discussions or pollution issues or any bad behavior that your neighbors might have essentially undertaken over the number of years. We also don't talk about illegal prosecution. We won't at any time tolerate any negative, adverse, offensive comments about either the applicant, agent, landowner, resident, commenting agency, nothing. So please be respectful at all times in your comments. And finally, if we find during the course of discussion that either additional minor variances are required or greater relief from the zoning bylaws required, well, that necessitates a recirculation of the application. So at that point, it means that we need to adjourn, and we need to adjourn to a date that will allow for all of that to occur. So also, you'll hear me repeat this evening a solemn oath or statutory declaration. That's because under the Planning Act, there's a requirement to post a sign on the property and then to file that statutory declaration. Because we've been online, we've been doing that essentially verbally. So far we've had a lot of good luck with that, no issues for the most part. So hopefully that'll stick for this evening as well. So with respect to quorum, if there's any issue, and again, knock on wood, we haven't had any. We haven't had to step anything down, but if that should happen, for whatever reason we lose quorum because of technological reasons, then we will try to reestablish. And if we can't reestablish the connections and quorum, then we will need to step the remaining items to a later meeting, to a future meeting of the committee. So, okay, so we have a very short agenda this evening. We only have 4 applications. We also have a couple of adjournment requests. Just in terms of procedures on this, the way we work is sometimes we fast track an application, sometimes we ask for a presentation. Where we ask for a presentation, we'll give the opportunity to the applicant or agent to essentially provide that, run through their presentations, then we can ask clarifying questions. And the committee gets that opportunity first, and then we'll open it up to the public hearing process, where I do have a speakers list for the items, and I will call down people to provide their comments or ask questions about an application. Just want to make a comment because we have an application tonight for which we have seen quite a bit of interest. There are a lot of speakers that have come forward. Generally, the best way to proceed when there is a contentious application, and what the committee prefers, is that the community is, so we ask the community association to come forward first, provide their comments. And in those cases, we actually will also ask that community association representative to table as many of the issues that they know of. So, and I think we have a fairly fulsome submission. So, and then after that, I will ask the people who are on the speakers list to give you an opportunity to speak. The only thing we'll ask, of course, is not to repeat what we already have. So we're very good at taking notes about what the issues are and keeping a tally of those as we go. So we don't need them repeated. And in fact, it'll help the proceedings simply be a little more efficient. So new information, of course, totally welcome. So so no worries on that. And if you do want to speak, so I've got quite a few names already on my speakers list, which then also gives us, for record purposes, the addresses. And this is for record keeping purposes, of course. So if you'd like to speak and you haven't been registered, that's okay too. We'll just ask you to give us your full name and your municipal address at the start of your presentation. And from there, then we can just move on. We may ask questions of those that are presenting from the public or from another agency or whatever, what have you. Also to get some clarification about the nature of the impacts that you may be talking about. So that could happen. Once we get through that portion, we close down the public piece. So that means after that, the panel members go into deliberation. No, we're not accepting additional comments at that point. It's closed. So we'll move on to deliberation. You may want to jump in there and say something, but I can tell you that once I say it's closed, it's closed. We're not going back. So, and with that, then once we've heard everything and we've deliberated, it's time for us to make a decision. Of course, we can grant, we can deny, we can choose to adjourn. We can also, when we have controversial issues, applications, we can reserve, which means if there's a lot of new information that comes to us, and I can tell you, so the committee members have quite a load of material that they look at prior to coming into these meetings. So we have all of the information that's come in on all of the applications, and we look at that information before we get here. So if there is, however, new information, it does happen, and it is helpful when it does happen. We, if there's a lot of it, then we may choose to reserve our decision. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't make a decision until next year. It means that we make a decision this evening. It just means that we'll close the hearing in general, and then we reconvene and we make a decision right after this hearing, essentially. So, and of course, once all those decisions are made, there is a decision that's issued within 10 days of the hearing, and that formal written decision provides some of the, of course, the rationale, and the decision of the committee is, of course, subject to a 20-day appeal period, during which time the decision can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So before I go a little bit further, welcome, Mr. White. We're glad to see you join us. I also want to thank, before we go too much further, our committee staff, because committee staff have been marvelous in getting these online hearings going. So I just want to introduce them very quickly. We have our Deputy Secretary Treasurer, Ms. Cheryl Williams, helping us out this evening. We also have Mr. Alex Jones, hi there, Ms. Mandy Nguyen, and Ms. Emily Byers. So that is our staff, and like I say, they are dedicated and they're always there for us. So so that's terrific. I'm going to go on to the items of business. I believe we have some minutes to adopt. Let's do that first. So do I have a motion to adopt the minutes of October 5th? I need a mover. Ms. Markovich, seconder, please, Mr. White. And on the minutes of October 19th, Ms. Willis, thank you, Mr. Hindle, as a seconder. Also, need to ask whether or not we have any conflicts of interest. Does anybody need to declare a conflict of interest on any of the items on this panel or a previous panel? No? right, so for the record, no members of the panel have any conflicts with any of the items heard on November 16th throughout the day of panel 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that brings us to, I believe at this point, our adjournments. And I believe we have 2. Application number 3 is the first, and that's for 153 Grandview. And I think I'm looking for Mr. Yelkatsi. Hello, Mr. Yelkatsi. How are you this evening?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
All right, can you give me the reasons for the adjournment request, please?
Staff have asked for an adjournment because they've requested that a environmental impact study be completed. They're basing that on the requirement in the new official plan that was just recently passed by the province. Since our application predates that, we would argue that it isn't necessarily required. We did submit a letter that deals with the terrain issues. However, we agree that we can adjourn simply because the client is going to have to do this environmental impact study for the purposes of a building permit. So we might as well, the client has agreed to, might as well get it done now. And we've engaged Kilgore and Associates to do the study, and they tell us that they'd be able to have it about the end of the year or completed by the end of the year. And so we're asking for an adjournment to, I wouldn't say to the 11th, but to the 25th of January, just to be sure that there's no issues with getting the study completed and giving staff enough time to look at it.
All right, so I'm going to call on Ms. Williams. So we typically only have one meeting in January. What's that meeting date?
It would be January 11th.
All right, so that's a little too early. So what's the first in February then?
It's February 1st.
All right, so Mr. Yelkatsi, so here's the issue, right? So in order to meet the first meeting in January, which is way too tight, I think you'd have to have that report undertaken, it reviewed, staff would then have to, include it. So I think we're going to February 1st.
Yes, I agree. We agree.
All right. So, and if at that time, Mr. Yelkatsi, we don't have the material and we're looking at a further adjournment, I think we'll be recommending a sine die at that point.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Questions, Mr. White, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification on this environmental impact statement requirement, am I correct in understanding that that is only required here because we are involved in an application? Staff should, I'd ask if staff could answer the question. Is it only required here because we're dealing with an application under the Planning Act, that being consent to a lot line adjustment? In other words, if we were simply dealing, if the city was simply dealing with an application for a building permit on one or both of these 2 existing lots, is it correct? Am I correct in understanding that an EIS would not necessarily be required, and that the only requirements would be with respect to the siting of the septic system? Am I correct on that? Because that's the way I read the definition of development under the official plan.
All right, Ms. Kelly.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, in response to Member White. I can't speak to whether there's a requirement under the building code for the EIS, but yes, you are correct. In this case, the trigger is because the lot line adjustment is a Planning Act application. And so the official plan requires the EIS when there's development adjacent to a natural heritage feature. So in this case, the lot line adjustment is considered development.
Okay, so if we were not dealing with the lot line adjustment, we have 2 existing lots.
That's correct. So if it was 2 existing lots, the applicant wouldn't require permission from the Committee of Adjustment. The planning department would not be commenting on the application. I can't confirm whether building code services, if there's a trigger at that phase that would require the EIS, but I could confirm that with environmental planners if needed.
I'm just, Madam Chair, I guess there's no argument to be made that we really aren't creating an additional lot here. We're simply adjusting the lot line between the two existing. In that circumstance, I understand the EIS requirement where you are creating additional development potential, but really we're not creating additional development potential. We're simply adjusting the line between the two developments that already could take place as of right.
Yeah, all right. So in this case, we have an applicant who is going to proceed with it in any event. There are approvals that are going to be required for development one way or the other. So I don't know either whether or not it's a building permit trigger. It may be, given the proximity to the flood line, I think is what it was. So I don't know. I'm not sure what result you're looking for, Member White, because in this case, I think we're prepared to proceed.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't have a problem with the adjournment. I would ask if I could get that answer when we see this application come back. In other words, if this was not an application under the Planning Act, would the building permit be conditional upon an EIS as well? Simply building permits required.
Okay, it's a valid question. We'll get that answer, Ms. Kelly. If you can be sure that that's addressed in your staff report, that would be much appreciated. Any other comments from the committee on the proposal to adjourn to February 1st? All right. I'm going to make a call out to the audience. Does anyone want to make any comments or have any questions with regards to this adjournment of this application for 153 Grandview to February 1st? All right. Not seeing anybody come forward, and so ready for a vote. Members, all those in favor? Okay. For the record, the application is adjourned to February 1st, 2023. Wow, sooner than we think. Okay, we'll see you maybe before then. If not, we'll see you then. All right, thank you, Mr. Yalkotsi.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so we have a second adjournment request, and that's for item number 4 for 1611 Apple Doom, and that's for, I'm looking for Mr. Segreto.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members.
Good evening, Mr. Segreto. Can you just give us very quickly the reasons for the request for adjournment?
Madam Chair, there's been some letters of concern with respect to this application, and I need some time to discuss it with the concerned neighbors and the community association, and possibly redesign a few things with respect to the single family dwelling. Therefore, I would like to sine die the file to give the owners and myself a chance to discuss it with them and see if we can come to some sort of an agreement.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions from Mr. Segreto with regards to the proposal to adjourn sine die? All right. Okay. So I'm going to go out to the public then before we make a decision. Is there anyone who wants to speak to the adjournment request? We're not discussing the application. I have for this application, I see Mr. McGough. Mr. McGough, is that? I see you on screen.
I have no comments to the adjournment issue.
All right. Okay, thank you. So and signing die means that there will be recirculation and a notice, so you'll be advised of the date that this item will come back in the same manner that you were notified for this particular hearing. Okay. So I'm not seeing anybody from the audience come forward with any questions or comments with regards to the adjournment. With that, then, members of the committee, all those in favor of an adjournment of the application, sine die. For the record, the application is unanimously adjourned. And so good luck, Mr. Segreto. We always, of course, are happy to see when applicants are going to try and work out some of the issues so that when the application comes forward, we know that there's been at least an attempt, if not everything resolved, at least we know there's been an attempt, and we get to hear that that discourse and those exchanges. So thank you, Mr. Segreto, for taking that on.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a great evening.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to go to item number 1. And that is for 1500 Upper Canada Street, looking for Mr. Parker.
Hello. I apologize as I'm currently driving, but I am connected, so I don't think it's great if I am video calling in, so I apologize.
No, that's fine, Mr. Parker. So, all right, we need to read something to you before we get going here, and that it relates to the statutory declaration. So I'm going to read, and then I'm going to need you to respond. So, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies? Secondly, that it was there for the prescribed number of days prior to the hearing, and that it was at all times clearly visible and legible. Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I affirm that to be true.
All right, thank you very much. Also have housekeeping items to go over with you, which has to do with the way that the frontage and lot areas were represented in the notice. So we're gonna propose 2 changes to you. One on the B00252, the frontage, the 71.64 will be struck and replaced with 96.41, and the lot area, 11,918.12 will be struck and replaced with 11,917.79 square meters. And on the application B00291, the frontage that's shown as 87.82 will be struck and replaced with 56.32. And the lot area that reads at 6,968.78 is going to be replaced with 6,969.14 square meters. Do you agree with those changes?
Yes, I do. And I believe I affirmed that via email as well prior to this.
All right, we're doing it for the record, Mr. Parker.
Yes,
So,
100%.
okay, so with that then, we don't need a presentation from you. We have had a chance to go through all of the material that's been submitted. So I'm going to open it up directly to the committee members for questions. Does anybody want to raise anything? Yes, Mr. Hindle, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just had a question about status of the site plan. I noticed it wasn't mentioned that there was a site plan underway, but I'm curious if one is underway or what the status of that process might be.
Yeah, so the site plan has actually been approved. So we are actually under construction at the moment. So we have site plan approval and all necessary building permits in place.
Okay, great. And you don't anticipate any issues with the severance creating problems with the site plan and your construction that's underway?
No, it was always planned to do that at some point, the severance. So this is just for us, part of the housekeeping as well.
Great, thank you.
All right. Anyone else from the panel with any questions for Mr. Parker? Mr. Parker, I take it you've had a chance to look at the conditions that staff has proposed?
Admittedly, I have not had a chance to look at those conditions.
Okay, because I'm going to ask you to accept them. So,
oh, okay. Well,
all right. Let me
Go
just
ahead.
run through them with you just briefly, because I want to make sure we're not going to have an issue here. First one is cash in lieu, which is pretty standard, so I don't think that one's too much of concern. The second one, however, relates to the requirement for a signed letter of permission from the owner of the property identified adjacent to the subject property for the removal, the proposed removal or operations impacting trees. Are you aware of that? Somebody told you about that requirement for a tree removal permit?
Yeah, I'm aware of the requirement. I've been in touch with the representative, it's Richcraft Homes to the north of us, who have actually requested, and I've sent that email to staff that they want all those trees removed. So they would be agreeable to providing that letter. So that's not an issue on the condition.
All right, so in other words, you can clear it easily. That's good to hear.
That's easy to clear.
Okay, so item number 3 relates to having independent water, sanitary, and storm connections as appropriate.
That's not an issue. That's part of the reason why we're going through the severance process right now.
All right, in which case the very last one has to do with the joint use maintenance and common elements requirement that you enter into that type of arrangement at your own expense.
Yes.
Issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
No issues. We already have lawyers working on it.
All right, that's perfect. That was it. So just for the record, you do endorse the conditions. Okay. Any other comments or questions from anybody before I go to the public? All right, I am not seeing anybody come forward with any more questions. So nobody on my speakers list apart from Mr. Parker, of course. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak either for or against or have any questions with regards to the application that affects the property at 1500 Upper Canada Street, and it's for consent? All right, I'm not seeing anybody come forward, so I think we can go to a vote. Members of the committee, all those in favor? All right. Okay, Mr. Handel, for a minute there, I wasn't sure where you were going. Okay, so for the record, the application is unanimously granted. So thank you, Mr. Parker, and good luck with the project.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
All right, have a good evening. Brings us to our last application, which is for property at 185 Kamloops Avenue. Looking for David Beckers. Mr. Beckers.
Hello.
Hi, can you come on screen?
Yes, I'm there. I am.
Okay, you may need to tilt your camera just a little bit. You're cut off there. Perfect. Okay, we have you. Before we go too much further, I need to read something to you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies, that it was there for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and that it was clearly visible and legible for the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I can affirm that to be true.
All right, thank you very much. With that, then I think given the amount of material and correspondence that we have received in relation to this application, I'm going to ask you to run through a presentation, Mr. Beckers.
Sure.
And then we're going to then at that point we'll open it up to the committee members for clarification, and then we'll go to the public portion. So
Okay.
the floor is yours, Mr. Beckers.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and to the committee for hearing our proposal. We are requesting the consent of the committee for a conveyance. The purpose of our application for consent is to request one oversized lot, 185 Kamloops Avenue, be severed into two fully zone compliant lots. Slide 2, please. The subject property is 185 Kamloops Avenue. It is a corner lot in the Revelstoke community with frontage on Kamloops Avenue and Dorothea Drive. The property currently contains a vacant, unhabitable, derelict one-story detached dwelling with an attached garage and features mature trees. Slide 3, please. The owners want to subdivide their property into two separate parcels of land for the construction of two new two-story detached dwellings. The existing detached dwelling and attached garage will be demolished. The property has 48.95 meters, 160 feet of frontage on Kamloops Avenue, whereas the average lot in the neighborhood is around 24 meters or 80 feet. There are very few properties in this community with even close to the 160-foot frontage, which we have. The severance can be achieved without the need for any variances, as both new lots generously comply with the lot width and area requirements demanded from the zoning bylaws. Each of the two new lots will be fully zone compliant. The zoning bylaw requires the minimum lot area to be 665 meters squared and the minimum lot width be 18 meters or 60 feet wide. Part 1, 181 Kamloops Avenue, seen in yellow, will have 25.51 meters or 83 feet of frontage on Kamloops Avenue and 28.89 meters on Dorothea Drive with a lot area of 737 square meters. The proposed lot width for Part 1 exceeds the minimum required by the zoning bylaw by 7.5 meters, 24 feet. So it exceeds the minimum required lot width by almost 25 feet. Part 2, 185 Kamloops Avenue, seen in green, will have 23.44 meters or 76 feet of frontage on Kamloops Avenue with a depth of 28.96 meters and will contain a lot area of 678 square meters. The proposed lot width for Part 2 exceeds the minimum required by the zoning bylaw by 5.4 meters, 17 feet. So it exceeds the minimum required lot width by almost 18 feet. These new lot sizes are amongst the average and typical of what is already in the community, where there are many lots as low as 18.29 meters or 60 feet wide. Next slide, please. This slide shows a few of the addresses along with their lot frontages for 25 of the houses surrounding the subject property. The proposed property sizes of 25.51 meters and 23.4 meters are consistent and even larger than many of the 25 closest neighboring properties. Existing lots along Revelstoke Drive, Kamloops Avenue, and Dorothea Drive have most lot widths ranging between 18.29 meters and 33 meters and lot areas between 668 square meters and 1,381 square meters. On the slide, I've highlighted the lot widths of the adjacent lots that are up to 23 feet more narrow to about equal in size to the new lots we're proposing. Over half the properties are smaller or within a few feet of being equal. The other lots are only slightly wider than what we're proposing. Slide 5, please. The official plan supports intensification in the general urban area, where it will complement the existing pattern and scale of development and plan function of the area. The owners plan to construct two-story detached homes, which aligns with the policy direction of the official plan that development in neighborhoods shall be low rise. The two proposed two-story singles resembles the built form in the community. And just because we got so many letters, I just want to talk about that a little bit. As well as the city's notice, the owners reached out to 35 of the closest neighbors with a mailing to provide notice and details regarding the proposed severance application. As of yesterday, 10 written responses were received, 3 showing support, 3 with concerns, 4 opposed, as well an unsolicited petition of support from 24 residents of Ottawa was also received. Many residents reached out for additional information or had questions and were provided with a response via email and or face-to-face meetings. The most common concern I heard from some neighbors was that the lots we propose are too small for the neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood is being challenged. It's likely they misinterpreted our proposal. The lots we are creating are exactly the same width as what is and what was already prevalent in the community since its inception. We respect the community's concern regarding changes that will negatively affect the character of the community. After all, the character of the community is what prompted my clients to buy in the Revelstoke community. The new owners of 185 Kamloops are planning to live there as well, so it's not their intention to change the character or build anything to offend anybody. The neighborhood has an eclectic mix of architectural styles from mid-century to contemporary designs in the form of modest one-story homes to modern traditional two-story homes, ranging in square footage from about 1,200 square feet to probably 4,000 square feet and even more. The owners of this property are intending to build 2 25 to 3,500 square foot houses, which is the average size of the houses in the neighborhood, and the new houses will only prove to enhance the street.
All right, so Mr. Beckers, so the timer has run out at this point, but I'd like to hear from you sort of in closing, how you see how this proposal meets the 4 tests. Or not, sorry, this is a severance, not even the 4 tests at this point, my apologies.
Right.
just in terms of how it is, I guess, just give me a concluding statement on how it, how well it fits into the neighborhood and how it's, I guess, going to compare. You've
Well,
been
I
doing
think
that
it's gonna
already, but
compare
just
because,
summarize it.
yeah, it's basically the same size as a lot of the neighboring properties. I think somebody's misinterpreted that we're making narrow lots, but we're in fact making lots that are 15 to 20 feet wider than what's a lot of the lots in there. I was going to talk about the trees as well and how the trees are going to the ones in the city boulevard are all going to be kept. All the healthy trees are going to be kept. So the tree line street will maintain the character as well.
All right, do show us that. What's being retained in terms of
everything that you see on this slide. Those trees are the ones that the arborists have suggested we protect. That wouldn't be that could be salvaged, but being outside the buildable area.
Okay. And how many trees are being lost?
There's going to be 7 trees that are going to be lost, 5 which are already dead.
Okay. All right. Any final word?
I could say my conclusion. It's just a paragraph. The future use of both the severed and retained parcels conform to the official plan and zoning bylaws. The size and shape of the resulting lots are suitable for proposed residential use, and the lots will front onto an established municipal road with municipal services. And it's our professional opinion that this proposal makes good use of the subject property and the request to consent to sever be granted.
All right. Thank you very much. I think it's this point, then I'll just open it up to the panel members. Anyone have from the panel any questions for Mr. Beckers for clarification? No? Okay. So if there's no further questions then from the panel for Mr. Beckers, I am going to open it up to the public, as I said. So we're going to open the public portion of the meeting. And I do have a community association, a representative that's on my list. So typically, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, what we tend to do is to rely on the community association to act as a spokesperson. And so I'm going to give Mr. Coyle, and we have a 5-minute maximum. And you saw the timer when Mr. Beckers was speaking. Now, typically for the applicant and the community association, I tend to give more time because we really do want to get the bulk of the information from the applicant and then the bulk of the concerns or comments from the community association. So looking for Mr. Coyle. Yes, I see you there, Mr. Coyle. Good evening. So Mr. Coyle, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to get through this, and please try to be as comprehensive as you can with regards, and I will make sure I'm taking good notes, and then we'll go on to the speakers list from that point. So the floor is yours, Mr. Coyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and David. I just have I have a presentation. If that could come up.
Okay, it does count within your 10 minutes. All right.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I've been asked to talk about the neighborhood character. Not all and each speaker has their concerns. I believe they need to voice those concerns. First, I'd like to set character setting, the timeline of how Revelstoke has developed over the years, and what I see from the documents that I have been provided by the different residents in the area, 3 conditions of concern. Revelstoke is part of Riverside Park, which is part of Ward 16, so the pink area, and its setting is along the river, and to the west and to the east is Riverside Drive. This is important in establishing the neighborhood's character. Next slide, please. one of the ways to capture this setting is we're on quite a slope from the right-hand side, which is Riverside Drive, which is a very busy street. And we descend down to the river, some 40 feet. And so these buildings are located where the red arrow are, and the buildings on the elevation map shows you its location. So I would characterize this as mid-elevation of Revelstoke. Along a very unique Kamloops Drive that is ended by a park. This mid-level area is a very different density than what we will see down on the riverfront. Next slide, please. Quite a history. As far as I could tell from Geo Ottawa, the first visualization of this area was around 1958. And the structure that we're talking about just happens to be one of the earliest structures. Now I'm putting this was probably built circa 1970. And you can see the trees in their youth on this plot. The next in the mid is in 1976 was an adjacent property, wasn't one of the first infills. And now we're talking about the second and third infill into the area. Next slide, please. So what we have is trees that probably look like the Sierra Nevadas. Since I've just come back, these trees are very tall and very encompassing because it's very hard to see this house. And this makes for this upper mid-level character are the trees. First concern on this slide is the orange dot, is that the house is being sited closer to the road. And the first condition we would be asking is that the two new buildings not encroach on the road. Next slide, please. The other thing that was very hard to tell as fitting into the character was any form of perspective of a two-story building would look like. And if you're beside this, that could be of concern. Just to look at the character and alleviate any concerns of residents. And also, you can see that this is covered, and it's very difficult to see because of the trees. And from what I just heard, a lot of these trees will be gone. So a condition is, could we get a better perspective in the drawing set of what to expect? And this I think will go a long way. Next slide, please. The next is that the trees were requesting that they be replaced and are allowed to grow. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle, for that. All right, so I'd just like to just make clear to everyone, though, this is a consent application. There's, in terms of the development and its massing and its any of that, that's not before us. We're not talking about that. There's no minor variance to talk about, building outside of the standards of the zoning bylaw. As far as we know, I mean, it's great and it's helpful when applicants provide a vision of what they intend to do, but there's actually no requirement that they do that for an application like this. So we're gonna deal on the merits of what's before us, and that is the consent application that we know from the staff report and from Mr. Becker's presentation is in compliance with the zoning standards. So, all right. So I don't think you used up your 10 minutes. I couldn't see unfortunately, the clock, but I will go to then the first speaker that I have on my list, and Mr. Martin, Mr. Tom Martin. Oh, sorry. Mr. White, you had a question then. I take it's for Mr. Coyle.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Actually, I think it's more back to the applicant, the agent. I heard in his presentation that, as I understand it, the proposal as it is would result in losing 2 living existing trees. Is that correct? And they would be located presumably in the buildable area of the proposed development. Is that correct?
Mr. Beckers?
That's correct. I have a slide 6, which shows those trees where they are. If you want to go there, but
You know what? There's a sufficient amount of concern about the trees. So yeah, let's do it. Let's bring that slide up and let's talk about them.
Okay. So the trees that are in question.
Sorry, Mr. Beckers, I'm going to ask the coordinator bring that slide back up so that we can all see a visual here.
Slide 6, yeah. Is
that the right slide?
No,
that's
one
7.
Previous to that.
All right.
Yeah. So trees 14 and 15. And I mean, we haven't gone through the design process yet for these houses. I mean, we're wanting to get the severance first, and then that way both parties that are going to be owning these can get their financing in place before they take on the next step, which is designing the houses. But there's trees number 2 and 3 are right in the buildable area, the top right left-hand corner. So 2 and 3, they're in the buildable area. So the arborist basically is saying that they probably won't live when we build in that area with the excavation. They probably won't live anyways. So he's suggesting they be removed.
So what's the condition of those trees?
They're in slide 7 and 8. So 7, very poor condition. Tree number 3 is actually hazardous.
All right. Okay. Continue.
The other one is tree number 14 and 15. They're getting close to the buildable area again, and the excavation would probably likely render those trees dead. But I mean, we will be looking at the houses. If we can save a tree, we'll try to save a tree, especially if it's in good health. But the ones that we were most concerned about were the ones in the boulevard area, which would impact the character more than any of the others. You know, even some in the backyard that we are saving, you know, it's unsure at this point what will happen to those, whether they become unsafe as well. But I mean, we will have to protect them according to the city standards.
All right. So I'm just going to call on Ms. Young. Ms. Young, are you here this evening? I wasn't sure if I saw your name.
Yes, I am here.
Ah, good evening. So Ms. Young, I'm reading your comments, the forestry comments in your report, and I think pretty much everything Mr. Beckers has suggested. You've had a chance to review the information in depth, and you have, and I'm just going to ask you to, well, no, rather than me reading, why don't you then just maybe summarize your comments so that everyone gets a chance to hear.
Sure. So yes, as Mr. Beckers has stated, 7 trees, 5 of which are in poor condition, are to be removed. There are a few trees that are the ones that he just highlighted a few minutes ago, trees 14, 15, and number 7, that are all very close to that yellow highlighted area, which I presume is the as of right footprint. Those are the ones that I'm more concerned about. And I think during the design process, it would be really helpful if they could look at trying to work around them as much as possible. I know some of them are in sort of difficult areas to avoid, but it looks like there is some flexibility to maybe move the buildings around a bit. So I think they should look at that. Somebody did mention about tree compensation and concerns with that. And if all these 7 trees are permitted for removal by forestry, there will be 13 trees required as planting, new planting on the site. So there may not be room for all that number of trees, and any that can't be planted would need to be paid for to forestry. But there is that requirement for compensation.
Just a follow-on question. What's the minimum caliber of any trees that are in fact planted?
It's 50 millimeters.
All right, thank you. Okay, Ms. Willis, go ahead, please.
Just a question for Mr. Beckers. I see from the site plan, the proposed site plan, that you have a rather odd driveway configuration for the interior of the 2 lots. And I'm just wondering if that is an effort to retain trees, that it's being made a rather irregular shape.
Correct. That's why it is shaped that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we've dealt with some of the issues that Mr. Coyle then has raised. I'm going to go to the next speaker, as I said, Mr. Martin. And just again, as a reminder, so we've covered sort of the tree issue, unless there's something new, and the scope of the elements that are before us. So, Mr. Martin, go ahead, please. We're gonna put the clock on. So just coordinators, I cannot see that clock at all once we're into presentation mode like this. So you will need to give me. There, perfect. Okay, good. I don't know why I couldn't see it before, but I couldn't see it. All right, so go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Please change the slide. Yes, hi everyone. My name is Tom Martin, and I live next door to 185 Kamloops. I've lived in my house for the past 33 years. There are several concerns that myself and the greater neighborhood have with this proposal that we would like to raise. On the circulation map from the Committee of Adjustment, 100% of affected homeowners, that being 17 people, in the 60-meter zone surrounding the property, have objected to the proposal. This excludes 3 vacant homes and 1 rental property. There are several reasons for the opposition. This subdivision was developed in the 1950s and 60s, providing modest homes on spacious lots that give a country feeling. Our concerns are that it will change the character of our neighborhood. We believe that allowing this lot to be severed and 2 houses to be built is not consistent with the character of the community. It will set a precedence for future severances. Looking back in 2000, the application to sever 94 Dorothea into 2 lots was dismissed by the Ontario Municipal Board. The neighborhood believes in 1 house, 1 lot. The home should conform to the original plans of the area as it was intended when the subdivision was created. Change the slide. An extended petition was also circulated with 60 additional signatures collected, indicating overwhelming support for our cause. 77 in total have signed. The dots on the map represent the people who have signed. Change the slide. I've included the signatures from the petitions that were circulated. Change the slide. Please. Change the slide, please. My concerns are that many new homes come with 10-foot or higher ceilings, not the 8-foot older ceilings. With 2 stories and a possible high-pitched roof, the difference in height between my house and the new neighboring house
Okay, so I'm going to start, let's skip this slide then, because as I mentioned, this is a consent application. The applicant didn't even need to provide any information with regards to the design of the house, and it's wide open with regards to what they can do at the end of the day when they come in with their building permit. So if you don't mind, let's skip, because it has nothing to do with the application before us. We can't consider any of this in our decision.
Okay, I'll continue on then. Having a 2-foot drop in grade will only exacerbate the difference between the two houses. With its side setbacks at 4 and 6 feet, with a likelihood that it will be 4 feet on my side, both our roof eaves will come very close to overlapping. Certainly not a norm in any circumstance. My understanding is that using all of the lot will extend the dwelling out towards the street by 11 feet from the frontal line of our house, and also extend 11 feet further back from the back line of our home. The extension will cause further invasion of our privacy from second floor windows, looking down onto our backyard and patio.
All right, so again, okay. Move on, Mr. Martin, please.
Okay. These massive homes and the removal of the many trees and hedges will alter the management of rainwater by removing much of the absorption that is currently being controlled by the open land, trees, and hedges. The 2-foot drop in grade to our lot will aggravate the flow of water onto our property and ultimately our basement, creating flooding conditions. The driveway will be up against our property line, causing disruption and excessive noise next to our bedrooms. This neighborhood is unique in that it has a country-like setting with many trees and large lots. There exist pockets of these neighborhoods scattered throughout Ottawa, Rockcliffe being one, that we believe the character of the neighborhood should be maintained. They are what helps make Ottawa what it is today. Now, the orange stake is where the city owns. This the white post is where they can build up to 11 feet from our front of the house, and it would probably be likely 4 feet over. So it's right up against our house. You can see the low pitch roof that we have. Change the slide, please.
Just again, if I can just interrupt for just a second. To the coordinators, I lost sight of the clock, so I have no idea where we are. So please give me when we have 1 minute left, please.
Okay, this poll here is where
Madam Chair, you actually caught it right at the 0 mark, so it is up actually now.
All right, so okay, so with that then, Mr. Martin, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to wrap up on your presentation, please.
Lovely. So this post here is 11 feet, leaving 11 feet from the front line of our house, where they could build out to, which is 15 feet from the city post. So it encroaches at the front, and we'd have a huge structure there. Change the slide, please. And you can see the retaining wall. It is 2 feet high, and our property line is on our side of the wall. On that, you can see the difference in the grade. Change the slide, please. And at the back, you can see the green post. This is where they could extend the house past the back line of our house, 11 feet. There's the back property line. Change the slide, please. And this is where the structure would be further back, 11 feet from where our house is. So there'd be a huge structure here, likely. And yeah, so on,
all right.
On behalf of myself and the neighborhood, thank you for your consideration on this matter.
All right, so thank you for that, Mr. Martin. I just before we go on to the next speakers, and I'm going to open it up to the committee members too, just a reminder, the houses are not part of the discussion. We do not have any requests for minor variances of any kind before us. So the design of the house is something that could change completely, and the location, as long as they're, and quite honestly, what they could choose to do is redesign the houses. And if they find they want minor variances, they can come back and talk to us about it. So just want to make that very clear, that we're not, you know, if your concerns are about the massing or about, you know, the location, we don't have a minor variance application before us right now. So just try not to get into that discussion, because it'll have no impact on our decision. So, okay, so with that, committee members, any questions for Mr. Martin? Mr. Martin did provide quite a few pictures for us to consider. So I'm going to start with Ms. Willis this time. I'm going to go to you, Mr. White, after that.
Yes, just actually following up, I think mostly from what the chair has just mentioned, that a lot of these issues are not related to the fact that we're talking only about creating an additional lot. So I don't know if it gives the speaker any sort of comfort, but whether or not it's one lot or two, all of your concerns would exist if one house was being built, because it would require the same setbacks from the property lines. They could build to the same maximum building height. They could put their driveway where they wanted relative to the site. So I think that the fact that your concerns are relating to development of the property, whether it's one lot or two, you sound like you're assuming that if it was to be kept as one, it would be a bungalow with great big setbacks, but that's not necessarily the case. So again, whether it's one or two houses, the impact on you wouldn't necessarily change.
Okay. Mr. White, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that one of the concerns I heard from the gentleman, Mr. Coyle, was concern over the grading and drainage of the property with the associated development. Perhaps Ms. Kelly can comment. One of the recommended conditions of any approval here would be the approval of a grade control and drainage plan by the engineering group at the city. And I believe that that's also a standard condition of any building permit issuance in the city. And the intent of that grade control and drainage plan would be to protect adjacent properties from any adverse impacts in terms of drainage, and also ensure that the subject development is adequately graded and drained. Is that, can Ms. Kelly just confirm that?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I can confirm all of those statements. A grading and drainage plan is required as part of a standard severance application. It's also required at the building permit. So staff have requested that as a condition of this application. When the applicant submits that plan, our engineers will review it. They're checking to ensure that runoff is going to be right of way, so not adjacent properties. They're ensuring that the grading meets all engineering standards. So correct, that is what has been requested for this application.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Martin from the panel members? I have just one, Mr. Martin, and I'm going to ask the coordinator to put back up your second slide. I want to ask you a question about that slide. I found it actually quite descriptive in terms of what's going on. So coordinators, can I ask you to do that? Takes a minute, I know, I asked them on the spot. Just do it. It's actually hard for them to go back and find it. Maybe the one before that. Yeah, that one. So, Mr. Martin, you talked about how this severance would, really change the character of the neighborhood. And I found it really interesting when you said that, because the first thing that my eye was drawn to was some of the smaller lots. And I'm looking at the one actually right across the street and the one next to it. You could almost fit those two lots right into the lot that's the subject property. And if you look at and if not those necessarily, there's certainly examples of other lots which look to be half the size. And I think we heard that through Mr. Becker's presentation, that there is in fact quite a number of those that can be identified in the proximity of the subject property. So how then do you think, I'd like to hear from you, how you think the consent of this lot is going to substantially change the character of the neighborhood? Oh, sorry, Mr. Martin, you must be on mute because I cannot hear you.
Okay, sorry. The two lots across the street, that used to be Mrs. Aesop's property, and they had severed it back in maybe the 60s. So, and it was an empty lot. What was it? 186 was an empty lot for the longest time. And then it had been severed, so they just sold it and they put a house up.
There's a lot of lots just in that vicinity, as I can see, this is a very large lot in comparison to most of the ones that I see on screen right now. So how do you feel that, so to your comment about how it's going to substantially change the character of the neighborhood, why is that? I need to understand that better.
Well, they're double lots. Back when the subdivision was created, they had to have septic. So that's why the double lots. So
now, speaking to the character of the neighborhood, Mr. Martin, how is it that you see this as being a real change to the character of the neighborhood?
Because there'll be two huge houses, and it's one of maybe 10 that could be subdivided. So once this gets going, they'll all get on the bandwagon, and the whole neighborhood will suffer, and it won't be the same.
All right. Okay. So I think I know your answer now. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to go on to the next speaker on my list, and that would be, I've got two names. It's Emily, I think it's Ms. Emily, and Mr. Sedrezami. So I see Ms. Emily, you're here.
Yes.
Are you speaking alone, or are you speaking with?
Yes. I'm
right.
speaking on behalf of my husband, Hamid Reza Sadrazami.
Okay, and you also have a presentation, so we need the clock back up. And I know I'm going to lose it, even though you made very nice effort to try to give it to me so I can continue to see it. But do give me the 1 minute countdown, please. But the floor is now yours, Ms. Amini.
Good afternoon, everyone. So from this slide, you can see that where we are located. So the proposed residence is across the street from our house, and we will directly be impacted by this proposal. Please go to the next slide. So I take a photo from both views from our house and the front of it. Please go to the next slide. And this is the view of 185 Avenue from our driveway. Go to the next slide. So me and my husband moved to this beautiful neighborhood back 2020 because of its unique character. Our neighborhood is defined by its large lot and generous landscape and open spaces. So if you walk in this neighborhood, you will see the houses are set far apart. The side yard setback are wide, and there is plenty of room for many large growing trees. Please go to the next slide. So the owner of 185 Kamloops Avenue proposing to split this space to the two houses. So it means that by two houses, there are two-car garages and less open space. It is unclear that how many trees will need to be removed, and although they have some proposal at this stage, but it's not clear that until the end how much of the existing tree can be survived after the construction. So approving this proposal means that there will be more hard surfaces due to the driveways, less green space, and also less room for the trees. Please go to the next slide. So the proposed houses may be comply with the existing zoning by law standard, but the houses do not fit the existing character of our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is defined by this large lot and many tree and generous green open space. So I'm worried that if you approve this, this will become the precedent that will be set if the proposal is approved. Many lots in our neighborhood large, so I take a satellite view of this neighborhood. Many of lots in our neighborhood are large, and if this is approved, there will be more applicants similar to this. That would be completely change the character of our beautiful neighborhood. That's why that I ask the Committee of Adjustment to refuse this application. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Minnie, for that presentation. It is appreciated that you've taken the time and the effort, and I'll extend that to Mr. Martin as well. Questions by the committee to Ms. Minnie on the application. Anyone? Yes, Ms. Willis, go ahead, please.
Yes, Ms. Amini, thank you. I'm just a bit confused. I understood that could you confirm that your address is 186 Kamloops?
Yes.
And so I believe that your house is actually quite a bit, the lot is quite a bit smaller than the ones that are being proposed here now, where it looks like your lot frontage is 18.29 meters. And what they're proposing across the street are between 5 and 7 meters wider than your lot. So I'm confused as to why. I'm assuming you think that your house and your lot fit into the character of the neighborhood. I don't understand how this will have any impact on the character of the neighborhood, given that you're already on a much narrower lot.
Yep. First of all, we are not the one that built this house, but we have a very big and old trees in front and the backyard. So the reason that with the current situation of 185, if they want to build two houses, this is the situation that they should kill the trees. And the other thing that when they create another driveway in the Kamloops Avenue, there will be a small driveway, and probably there will be no more traffic even from this street, from this side. So currently on 85 Kamloops Avenue driveway is on the other side. It's not in exactly located in the Kamloops. But these are some old trees pre-existed in that house. So during construction, probably a lot of them will be hit. And I noticed only maybe 1 or 2 trees that is nearly dead. Most of them are in the good condition.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we heard, and because I want to reiterate, we heard from Forestry Services that confirmed essentially the findings of the trees on the lot. So we've put that one to rest. So we know that there's 7 out of the 9 trees that could possibly be impacted. Remember, it's a proposal, conceptual kind of development. But correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Beckers, it's 5 out of the 7? 7 out of the 9? Wait, I've got to get to my report in order to get there.
Sorry, it's 7 trees. 7 trees that are going to be removed, of which 5 are dead.
All right, thank you. All right, so we know that. So that's been looked at by the experts. We have our own city experts that have had a chance to review that material. So we do know that there are a number of trees that are not likely to survive one way or the other. So, okay. Any questions, other questions? I know Ms. Willis had one. Anybody else on the panel for our speaker? Okay, if not, we're going to go to the next person on the list, which is Ms. Honeywell.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. So my name is Lee Honeywell, and I'm a resident of the Revelstoke neighborhood. I live down the street on Kamloops as well. I moved to the neighborhood in 2021, moving into a house whose previous owners had been here for nearly 60 years. My family's been in Ottawa since 1809, so I know a little bit about the character of the city. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to go door to door in the neighborhood because I have a full-time job. But I did manage to collect 25 signatures from a number of younger people, both in the neighborhood and around the city. Fundamentally, we've changed a lot as a city since 1955 when this neighborhood was built. We're also in a housing and climate crisis that we were not in 1955. All that said, I support this move towards gentle density in our neighborhood. I think it is in line with the official plan and in keeping with, as many of you have noted, the existing character of the neighborhood. There are 25 plus lots out of the, 100 or so in the neighborhood that are relatively the same size as the post-severance lots. Right now it's legal to build enormous monster houses in this neighborhood that go all the way to the property line. And I think it's really rad that people are going to build 2 modest houses that are in keeping with the other modest 2-story houses in our neighborhood. I echo Madam Chair Tremblay's note as to how strange it is that some of the applicants that are concerned with these new houses have lots that are the same size as the post-severance lots. I think it's kind of messed up, frankly. And, I just wanted to, I'm not going to take the whole 5 minutes, but I live in a modest 1-story house next to 2 houses that were subdivided in the 80s. I'm on one of the original double lots. I love having a big space around myself, but I also love having neighbors right next to me. They're great. And I really am stoked to be able to support this severance and welcome 2 additional families to our wonderful neighborhood. It's been great having neighbors right next to me, again, on these smaller lots. And I look forward to having more neighbors. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Honeywell, for those comments. We always appreciate seeing both sides of the discussion. So thanks for taking the time to join us this evening on that. Any questions for Ms. Honeywell? Mr. White.
Madam Chair, I'm just looking at the staff report from the planner. There is mention of the Riverside Park secondary plan and the fact that the subject application is in conformity with the objectives of goals of that secondary plan. I wonder if we could just get some information on the history of that. I'm assuming a secondary plan was implemented, that there was a public participation process, and I'm wondering when that would have occurred. I'm assuming it was well after 1950s and 1960s when this community was originally developed, so that some of the planning objectives for intensification and the background to the zoning bylaw are probably included in that secondary plan. I wonder if we could just get some information on when that process happened and how it would have transpired in terms of public involvement of the community.
Ms. Kelly, over to you.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I don't have the date at hand right now, but I can check that momentarily. For now, I can kind of speak to the policy direction in that secondary plan, which is part of the old official plan. So some of the policy directions that are in the Riverside Park secondary plan are to ensure the continuing existence of a mix of housing types and densities. And it speaks to accommodating a variety of household sizes and incomes and lifestyles in the area. It does give deference to the existing character of the neighborhood and talks about moderate residential development. Staff is of the opinion that the proposal is moderate and does align with that policy direction. Further, I'll also note that in the secondary plan, the property is designated as a residential area, specifically a low density residential area. So in this area, it's really limited to ground oriented development, being single detached dwellings as proposed. So I'll just go off for a second and I can get the date for Member White and see if there is any other information about the public consultation that went through. It's a fairly old secondary plan.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. So while Ms. Kelly is doing that, Member White, if you're okay with it, I'll go back to Ms. Honeywell. She didn't use up her full 5 minutes. We're going to give her another minute. She must, if she has a comment, and we'll go back to you, or if you have any further comments, or Ms. Kelly if she comes back with that date. So go ahead, Ms. Honeywell.
I'll be super quick. Just from having spent a lot of time walking around the neighborhood and being a connoisseur of architecture of single family homes in the past couple decades, I think they're, going by the sort of what qualitatively I've experienced in the neighborhood, I think a lot of the subdivided lots that are the single size versus the double lots in the neighborhood were likely built in the 80s. So it gives you sort of a sense of when. I don't know exactly, I'm not a planner, how that stuff lines up, but I think a lot of the houses in the neighborhood that are on single lots were built in the 80s.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. White, did you have any further questions? Or is just waiting for the response from Ms. Kelly?
Oh, Madam Chair, thank you. Just if Ms. Kelly has some further background on that secondary plan, my guess is that around the 1980s, as Ms. Honeywell suggests, is probably when that process occurred, and there would have been any secondary plan process in a public involvement in preparation of these plans, so that at the time that it happened, I'm sure that the community would have had significant input into that process.
Okay. So how about I go to the next speaker then, and then when Ms. Kelly comes back, we'll get that answer from her. And I have Mr. Kingston, or Ms. or Mr. Kingston, not sure. Hello. You're on mute.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee. And thank you, David, for your proposal. I've been a resident of the area for 31 years, and to me, Kamloops Avenue, 185 Kamloops Avenue, it lies in the heart of what is colloquially referred to as the Revelstoke Drive area. And that includes, of course, Dorothea Drive, Revelstoke Drive, and Leopold Drive, which we've already established. This area, as others have said, is known for its large residential lots and country-like setting, akin to the beauty of its namesake in British Columbia, controlled floodplain and all. These are highly sought-after attributes which property owners choose at the time of purchase and agree to pay taxes to the City of Ottawa handsomely. I would guess that the average residential property taxes paid by residents within the area are some of the highest in Ottawa outside the downtown core. Indeed, properties have been held and taxes paid in some cases for generations to secure and help maintain the character and heritage inherent in the neighborhood. Generous, orderly, offset, symmetric streetscapes and property lines are signatory elements of the area on which residents have stood firm for years. As you know, Kamloops Avenue lies within the R1 residential first density zone. Under item 4 of the R1 zone, it states the purpose of the zone is to regulate development in a manner that is compatible with existing land use patterns, so that the attached dwelling residential character of the neighborhood is maintained or enhanced. The proposed changes to that lot neither, in my opinion, neither maintain nor enhance the residential character of the neighborhood. These numbers that I'm going to speak to, I just divided the property in half. I didn't have the advantage of having the plan. So given that, the average property area on Kamloops is 1,403.52 meters. This is more than twice the proposed subdivision at a mere 706.84 meters. The proposed depth of the subdivided lots is 28.96 meters, while the existing average is 50.04 meters, which is nearly twice the proposed depth. The proposed subdivision is well below the average lot area for the street. And although the lot width, which we've been looking at, may be comparable to a handful of other lots, give or take 24 meters, these are always much deeper than what is being proposed for 185 Kamloops. To conclude, the subdivision of 185 Kamloops Avenue would set a highly unwelcome precedent of change to the area, for which current property owners are largely opposed. The introduction of smaller lot sizes within the area is not consistent with the landscape architecture of the neighborhood. Additionally, the subdivision would detract from those attributes above, which set the Revelstoke Drive area apart from other Ottawa-based residential landmark areas. And a landmark, really. If approved, the project would negatively affect the character and property values of the entire neighborhood. I am opposed, along with at least 77 other residents within the area, to support the applicant setting a precedent at the expense of the entire community and indeed the historical significance of the landscape architecture under which the neighborhood was conceived. I hope you will agree the risk for harm to one of our city's most stable communities is too high a price to pay for the applicant's gain. Thank you for your time and serious consideration to one of the things we hold most dear, the community we have built for close to 70 years. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kingston. I'm going to open it up to questions to you in a moment, but I see that Ms. Kelly is back. So we're going to get a date from her on that secondary plan, and then we're going to get questions of clarification for you, Ms. Kingston. So go ahead, Ms. Kelly.
Yes, through you. Yes, through you, Madam Chair, in response to Member White's question. So Riverside Park Secondary Plan was created in 1999, and then it was carried forward in 2003 with the amalgamation of the city. And I'll just note as well, so through the new official plan process, planning staff at the city reviewed the secondary plan policies across the city, and there was public consultation during the new official plan process. And through that review and drafting process, it was determined that a lot of the policies contained in the Riverside Park secondary plan were dated, many of which were no longer necessary because the infrastructure in the area had been built. So the Riverside Park secondary plan was not carried forward in the new OP. Staff still reviewed it against this application, given that this application was deemed complete prior to the adoption of the new OP. But many of the policies do not carry forward.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly, for that very fulsome overview of what's been going on with a secondary plan that's actually a little dated at this point. Member White, I knew you might have a question coming out of that or a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow up. Is it, given that in 1999 is not all that long ago, given that information, is it reasonable for us to assume, and I think I know your answer, reasonable for us to assume that at the time that the secondary plan was adopted, the provisions in the zoning bylaw in terms of minimum lot widths, lot areas, et cetera, were taken into consideration and considered for any possible review, and that review may or may not have taken place, but essentially the provisions that we are working with today are consistent with the secondary plan policies and objectives.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I would agree. The secondary plan doesn't prescribe any minimum lot size requirements. The zoning bylaw, I don't have a date for which those minimum regulations came into play, but a zoning bylaw essentially implements the direction of the official plan and secondary plan, so that review did take place.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Questions for Ms. Kingston from panel members? Anyone? All right, Ms. Kingston, the one thing that I saw from, and not just from previous speakers, there's a theme evolving. I think we've been talking a lot about the character. I'll tell you, I'm still not convinced based on sort of the lotting fabric that I have seen, and that in some of the information that Mr. Beckers has presented. But the notion of precedence, so that's a different story. And we've heard this from, and you're not the only neighborhood, obviously, that when they're faced with new consents within their area, it's a very natural reaction to do exactly that. Be worried about the precedence that comes. Now, I said we weren't going to talk about property values because it really cannot be part of our considerations, right? Because it's very speculative. And I'll tell you that interestingly, though, is we hear from other community associations that actually say, you know, what we've found out is we hear these developers come before us and talk to us about, you know, creating affordable housing. And here's a good reason for us to, in fact, provide, you know, this is why we should be approving it. And the reality is the houses that wind up on some of these lots, I'm not going to speculate, but they wind up being far more expensive. So the reality is the value increases in some of these neighborhoods rather than going the other way. So I just thought I'd share that. I'm not saying that it won't happen in Revelstoke, because it is a valid concern, but it is a trend that we're seeing in other neighborhoods that are mature, very mature like yours, and that are being faced with some of these pressures for intensification. But I do have it noted, and in terms of the precedent. So thank you for just emphasizing that in your presentation as well. So if there's no other questions then for Ms. Kingston, I can go on to the next speaker. And that would be Mike Ripon. Ripon? Don't know how you pronounce it, but in French it's Ripon. So, Ripon, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, hello. So, all right.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. Our lot is right next to the proposed building site. We're 165 Dorothea. You might have noticed on that on several maps of the area that our house is it's oddly located. It's on Dorothea, but we have a backyard that stretches along almost the entire lot, 185. I do have a couple of concerns. I mean, many of these things have been shared. I'm not going to go over them because clearly lots of comments on character. I agree with all those things, by the way. I am concerned about the trees. I would, look, I'm not a forestry expert, but I see those trees every day. I doubt very much there are 7 trees close to being dead. But anyway, that's just my opinion. I am concerned about the cedar hedge. I am concerned about backyard windows looming over my backyard. So definitely privacy concerns there. And I will tell you, if there were 2 large homes on that lot at the time that we purchased this home in 2015, well, we wouldn't have purchased the home. We simply didn't want that. We came from Alta Vista, where, you know, we had much the same discussion going on. A lot of infill housing going on small lots, big homes. And this is the character of the community we're coming to see and live in, was frankly more open space, mature trees, bigger lots, and reduced traffic. So I know we can't talk about property value. That certainly is a concern. Having said that, there is one thing that the plan needs to consider. I don't know if it just happens that the hydro service can be just installed across my property. There is one service right now. Is there not an easement requirement for a secondary service? I noticed there are 2 lines on the map that Mr. Becker presented. Frankly, I don't, one is enough, thanks. 2 hydro lines crossing my property in my backyard is more than I care to see. I just, I really would, I do want to, I'd like to hear from Mr. Becker whether that cedar hedge is going to be maintained. And one thing that hasn't been discussed here, it's not just the trees. There's a lot of bird life in those trees, a lot of different species. So please bear that in mind in your consideration, please. There are cardinals that nest in those cedar trees every year. They come back. There are all kinds of other birds, hummingbirds, lots of character in this neighborhood. So please consider that. Other than that, and aside from, I guess, the other major concern that's been discussed, I would really hope that the city's doing their job when they're looking at drainage, because right now our backyard collects a lot of water. So as Tom pointed out, there is a elevation difference between the properties. We're in the backyard, from our backyard to the proposed backyard is about 2.5 feet. So everything just drains into our lot. We have constant sump pump running in the spring, which is fine. We bought it that way. We understood that, but we just need to make sure there's not more water coming in. That's all I've got to say.
All right, thank you very much for that. So you did raise a couple of new ones, which is great. On the drainage, there's always two different issues. So there's the drainage within the community overall and how that's performing. And then there's the drainage on the property. So we know through the conditions and through the way the process works that there's going to have to be evidence provided to the city that the drainage on the property is going to be in keeping with whatever the criteria is. I think it's about pre-development and post-development flows and how that's actually managed. The bigger issue that you're talking about happens also in a lot of mature neighborhoods. And that's a bigger issue in terms of trying to engage with the city and ensuring that the evaluation of the issues and any remedial works that need to be done gets addressed. What's happening right now at the city is that they're undertaking an infrastructure master plan. So now's a really good time to be engaging with city staff. If there is an issue in the neighborhood that really needs to be looked at. So I'll invite you, if you don't know who to call, to contact committee staff, and they'll help you get in touch with who that person would be. That's a separate issue from drainage on the property. So I just wanted to make that comment. Do want to get a little bit, just confirmation then from you, Mr. Beckers, on that cedar hedge. What is the fate of that cedar hedge going forward?
I probably can't comment on that yet because we haven't gone through that stage.
Okay.
But I don't know.
All right. Okay, and with regards, Mr. Beckers, I was just looking to see what the comments were from Hydro Ottawa on the lines, and all I have here is that the owner will be required to cover the costs of supply. Have you had a chance to have discussions with Hydro Ottawa at this point to figure out?
No, not at this point, but we know we in order to get our building permit, we will have to have those discussions and get those things ironed out.
All right, you've heard the comments from Mr. Ripo, so I don't know if you're going to have options in terms of providing that electrical supply, but I would just encourage you to consider the comments that you've heard.
Yep, it's been heard.
And then after that, I think we've covered a lot of the rest of the issues that were raised. Any questions from the committee members for Mr. Ripo? Mr. Hindle, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I guess the question that I have, it's one that comes up often on these applications. What in your mind is the difference in impact between a single, for instance, a single 5,000 square foot home with easily a 3 or 4 car garage that would, fill a good portion of the site as of right? It could be built today. What's the difference between and something like what's in the proposal, which is 2 more modest homes with 2 car garages each? What's the difference in impact for you, and how that either fits or doesn't fit with the neighborhood in this case?
Yeah, well, I'm not really going to comment on the neighborhood. What I would say, and if you're building a single dwelling on that property, any planner is going to consider backyard effect. It's a narrow lot. So the way the houses are positioned right now, backyards are gonna really face my backyard or the side of my lot. And you've got 2 of them. If it were single dwelling, I doubt very much they would position the backyard there. It would likely be towards one end or the other end of the lot. So yes, it might be a large home. It's still, the setbacks are still questionable, who knows? And that's unfortunate. We don't know any of the planning specs on this. And of course we're not advised on this, so fine, we just have to bear with it. But really it's a privacy concern. I've just heard Mr. Becker say that they're not sure about that cedar hedge. And by the way, the cedar hedge is 30 feet tall. It's not 10 or 12 feet. These are very mature trees. So it's not, and it's probably 5 to 6 feet thick. So it's not, okay, if it were an 8-foot hedge, that would be a consideration, and fine. But these are big trees. So it does have an immediate impact on my property and certainly on my privacy. And I would say probably despite the fact you say we can't consider property value, I'm going to consider it because it's my home and I wouldn't have bought the place otherwise. That's my response.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Or Mr. Hindle, any follow-up from, no? Okay. If there's no other questions, then for Mr. Ripaud, I'm going to go on to the next speaker. So I'm looking at Sandra Fraser and Tom Zontinst. I'm sure I got that wrong. So who's going to speak? Somebody's on mute. I think I see somebody speaking, but you're on mute.
Good try, Madam Chair, but it's a tough day.
Okay, all right. Well, tell me though. Don't leave me in the.
So thank you. My name is Tom Zanotin.
Zanotin. All right, thank you.
And my wife Sandra Fraser and I live at 3736 Revelstoke Drive, which puts us 2 lots away from the subject lot as the crow flies. We've lived in this neighborhood since the year 2000. And my wife and I distinctly recall 2 very similar requests for the division of, actually it was 2 different lots on Dorothea that are right around the corner from the subject lot that were brought forward just after we moved in. Both of those applications were rejected by the Committee of Adjustment. One of the applicants went forward and appealed it to the OMB, where it was rejected a second time. And I'm not a city planner, but I understand you folks are not bound by precedent, but the OMB ruling does make for interesting readings, certainly to me as a neophyte then and still a neophyte in terms of how these things are viewed.
Sorry, can I just, what year did you say that decision was in?
2001, Madam Chair.
2001. Okay, thank you.
And the lots, as I said, were almost identical in size and aspect ratio to the subject lot. So here we are 22 years later, and we have another application to sever a very similar looking lot. And I must stress, an average sized lot for the neighborhood. Mr. Beckers was very thorough about showing data on street frontage, and his numbers seem very reasonable to me. But the story, when you look at average lot size, is quite a bit different. The lot in question is current size is only 10% larger than the average size of a lot on Kamloops. There are 26 houses on Kamloops, and the average size of those lots is 1,289 square meters, and this one, the before severage, is around 1,415, or Sandy had a slightly different number, I think. So if you have the current lot and you end up with 2 smaller lots, I realize they're not intended to be equal, they work out to be about 55% of the size of the current average lot on Kamloops Drive. These aren't my numbers. They're taken actually from the notice I got from the City of Ottawa and that OMB report in 2001. So I too take the view that the proposal would for the lot size would be very much out of character with the neighborhood as a whole. In its 2001 ruling for those two severance applications, the Committee of Adjustment wrote, and I quote, "Approval of the application would drastically alter the character of the neighborhood, which is one of large landscape lots with plenty of open space between existing buildings." So unless the new homes that are to be built are going to be very small in size, which seems counter to the numbers that were mentioned earlier, it's hard to see how this new arrangement would be in keeping with the Committee of Adjustment's description of our neighborhood. The OMB at that time, in their judgment, went a bit further, and I quote again, "To have the lot would create a serious disparity with the average lot size that exists in the community." Again, this is not my opinion, it's the OMB's opinion. It's actually taken from virtually the concluding portion of their rejection of the application to sever a similar lot that many years ago. That's all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you for your time.
All right, well, thank you very much for raising those OMB hearings. Those are always interesting to hear the background on those as well. So, all right, any questions then for Mr.
Zanotins.
Zanotins, okay.
I'll turn you into an honorary Latvian before the evening's done, Madam Chair.
Okay, anyone on that? Okay, so I just have a question because I want to make sure I understand the context correctly, and it's for Ms. Kelly. Ms. Kelly, not to put you on the spot, I hate doing this to you, but so if these OMB decisions were in 2001, can you tell me when, so there was I think amalgamation was in 2001. What was the year of the first OP then? So all of the various municipal OPs and zoning bylaws would have been in place until the first, was it 2006, 2005?
No, Madam Chair, it was 2003.
Oh, it was 2003, okay. So in 2001 then, very much the, I'm looking at the policy context, right? I want to understand, it's great, you know, that we have these kinds of words, but remember that the board chairs were making the decision in the context of the policies that they had in place at the time. And I found the year very interesting because it was amalgamation, and all municipal OPs essentially, I think, remained in force until they were repealed through the OP review process in 2003. If I recall, I may be wrong, correct me, Ms. Kelly, if I got that wrong, but I think that that's how it worked. And the only reason I bring that up is because I just need to understand where we were at that point. Okay. All right, no questions then. I can go on to Mr. Beckers. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say that there are a lot of lots that are bigger in area. Most of those are along Revelstoke, along the river. They're very deep lots. The internal lots on Dorothea and in Kamloops are not as wide or as deep as any of those lots along Revelstoke, along the river, and across the street.
I would expect that the lots as well that are along the river have, because they have the flood lines that affect them, they would have to be quite a bit larger anyway, if for development, just because they have that added challenge to them. So it's quite possible. Thank you though, Mr. Beckers. That is helpful information as well. Okay, next speaker, Mr. Zanotins.
Zanotins, Madam Chair, I think I left about a minute on the timer. If I could just clarify, I wasn't talking about the lot area on the neighborhood as a whole or those larger lots on Revelstoke. I was using numbers out of the OMB report for Kamloops Drive and Dorothea. The current lot is 10% larger than the average size on Kamloops. The severed lots will be approximately 55%, almost half the size of the current lots. Revelstoke Drive was not part of my comments.
All right, thank you for that clarification. All right, so again, I just want to caution, I do appreciate the comments that came out of that OMB hearing, but in that the decision, the only issue I always have, of course, is in terms of due diligence, we would have to then look at how many lots were created since 2001, and that kind of thing, to see whether or not that. Anyway, I appreciate it though. Like, and we're going to take it into consideration for sure, because it raises some of these other questions. All right, Ms. Lavoie, you're next. Did you want to speak? Okay, so you're on mute.
I am there. Thank you. I've unmuted. I have a number of points that I would like to address, and some of them have been being this late. So I'm just going to speak of a few points. First of all, thank you for the time. With all due respect to Mr. Beckers, we did not misunderstand your proposal, sir. We completely understand that this is for a severance, and as Tom Snowden pointed out, this is not an oversized lot for the community. This is a very, small lot for some properties, and it is not an oversized lot. So I want that to be clear and noted that we did not misunderstand your proposal. So just to be clear on that. And I want to make your slide number 4 was slightly inaccurate. I believe it was slide number 4, in that you have a line drawn across the back of the properties on Riverside Drive. That line does not exist. The properties actually go from the street right to the river. So that's an old slide that you had. So I'm not sure how your calculations were made for that side of the street in terms of the oversized lots that you spoke about. So I guess what I want to address is intensification. We're fully aware that, intensification is a priority for the City of Ottawa, that it is a priority for the province, and you are encouraging it. And we accept and we recognize that there are economic benefits and lifestyle benefits to those living in certain neighborhoods, to have people closer together. There's savings for the city. There are services that are available to those people walking within 15 minutes of those services. This neighborhood doesn't fit that. We don't move, people don't move from Alta Vista, move from the Glebe to come and live here because they want to have access to those services. So we don't have schools to walk to. Parents aren't walking their kids to school here. We aren't going down the street to eat in restaurants. We're not going, down the street to see a show, to see a play. So that's not that kind of neighborhood where we want to bring in lots of people and lots of houses. We choose to live here because of exactly that character in the neighborhood. And Madam Chair, you said that you were not convinced about how this would change the character of our neighborhood. So I invite you to come and walk down the street with me tomorrow. And I'm not sure if the members of the community have actually walked down the street and come here and feel what it feels like 12 minutes from Parliament Hill to feel like you're in the country. You walk to the end of the street and there's a river. And the Rideau River is very much a reflection here. This part of the Rideau River is very much a reflection of the community itself. There are very, very few motorboats. There are stand-up paddleboards, there are kayaks, there are canoes. It's that kind of neighborhood where intensification and bringing, many, more houses and more people into the neighborhood will significantly change this neighborhood. So I'm not sure the members of the community actually understand that. I've lived here for 33 years. We've brought up our family here. I've seen the neighborhood change. I've seen people die in their homes. I've seen older people leave. I've seen younger families move in. And they have all respected the character of this neighborhood. And this is a jewel in the City of Ottawa. And I don't think that people understand that. And there are not many jewels like this in the City of Ottawa. And I believe it is your responsibility. I'm asking the committee, and I'm begging you to respect and preserve the nature of this treasure in the City of Ottawa. This severance will open the door. This severance will open the door as a precedent to have people sever their lots. and to bring in more people. And the people of this community, and you have seen that Tom has gone, 100% of the neighbors are against this severance. So I'm hoping that you will understand and respect the will of those who live here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I just want, not that I want to contradict you, Ms. Devois, but we do have a number of letters and support that have been submitted from people within your neighborhood. So there's some discrepancy between, within the neighborhood itself and neighbors in terms of how they're viewing this particular application. So we do have those letters of support. Ms. Honeywell is not alone in having come forward. So, but people haven't spoken tonight, but we do have the letters, just so that you know. Okay. What else? I just want to think about some of the comments that you made. All right, so you're saying the subject property is not oversized. You're questioning some of the calculations, intensification. Okay, so and it's a very, the character is a country setting within minutes from the downtown core. So I think I think we've been able to get that sort of that picture from you. So thank you for having provided your thoughts and that description. Is there any questions from Ms. Lavoie from committee members? No? All right. The last on my list, that doesn't mean it has to be the last person who speaks, but the last on my list is Mr. Cook. We have Mr. Cook?
Yes, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Good. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm coming through on the image, but I live on Dorothea. We've been here for 12 years going, and it was a character that we brought this, and it was a character that we really wanted here. I was just getting there we go, videos on. As been said earlier, this is a unique community in the sense there's no sidewalks, bicycle paths, bus routes, stores, or visible commercial. So it's very, very much a residential, but a country residential. Our property alone is 30, I had to convert everything back to metric, I'm old fashioned, 30.5 meters by 45.5 meters. We're just down the road on Dorothea, and a lot of the properties along here are that. If you continue on Kamloops, there's approximately another 10 homes. I did a walk by, and about 10 homes are long ranch style with wide frontage, but exceptionally deep lots as well. So the lot size and the orientation of 145, the lot we're talking about, is very much in keeping with what we have. It's a bungalow ranch style, the existing one, and it needs a lot of work. I go by there every day. I was quite surprised to hear that as many trees are dead as there are, because I actually walked around yesterday and it looks very much, there's a lot of live growth. It's just incredible, the canopy. Some of these trees, 60, 70 feet tall. I'm just worried about the root structure. These are old trees that have been there for a while, and it's not going to be easy to surgically work around them. So I have a fear that, the invasiveness of two buildings will put a strain on that. But enough said about the urban canopy. The precedents, since we've been here, we've been here since 2010, and we've seen a few lots subdivided, and we've talked to our neighbors, and there has been an ongoing trend of lots being subdivided here and there. There have been a number of lots that have been purchased and retained in that size, and so we're quite happy with that. So I'm just worried that these other 10 lots, as the original owners get older and start selling them, that they come prey to potential folks coming in and trying to subdivide and starting all over on the growth and the look. Culture and heritage has been mentioned a couple times, and what's interesting is about 130 homes in our area, of which 3 on Dorothea alone and 1 over on Leopold are heritage homes, heritage designations. So the look and feel, like our home is a heritage home, very much Frank Lloyd Wright. The other two homes are very, very similar. Ours is a 2-story, but the other two were single story, but unique. And ironically, the old place on the corner that we're talking about subdividing was one of these unique styled ranch homes that unfortunately just fell into disrepair and such. Finally, the point I'd like to look at is the infrastructure. The Revelstoke Drive a couple of years ago was completely torn up, and the road was repaved. But in doing that, they also looked at redoing the sewer and the water system completely. So major upgrade. However, Dorothea and Kamloops, and I believe they're on the books for Ottawa to look at resurfacing the roads of both Dorothea and Kamloops sometime in the next year or two. Driving along bumpily, thank heavens you can't go very fast because it's quite a rocky ride, but low traffic doesn't matter. But I'm worried about the strain to infrastructure that the precedent's going to set. You know, like one home at a time is going to add more to the water, the sewage, the power and such. The last storm, we were without power for 14 days, in part to Hydro Ottawa had a formidable task trying to get through all the foliage that had come down. You know, we have a huge canopy, but bottom line here is I believe that the precedent, not just these two homes, but the other ones that are going to be coming, will continue to exacerbate the infrastructure to the point where we're going to have a lot more problems, or it's going to cost everybody big time to completely revamp and upgrade the infrastructure to handle it. So thanks very much for your time, Madam Chair, and I rest my case for now.
Mr. Cook, your timing is perfect. You're down to 8 seconds, so well done. The infrastructure one's an interesting one. We have seen, again, as a committee, we do get faced with the same sort of concerns from other neighborhoods. We did ask, because we did get a chance to meet with city staff about 4 times a year, and so that we can understand better their processes for, you know, coming forward and supporting applications. So the planners at the city are the quarterbacks, and they essentially circulate the applications to just about everybody in the city that has any kind of technical interest in these kinds of things. And my understanding, and Ms. Kelly, you can correct me, but my understanding is that these are also circulated to the public works people, who do look at it through a lens of so what's the impact of this? Is there serviceability? And where is that going, sort of, you know, what's the cumulative impact, and you know, whether or not this additional severance would be somehow just not supportable. So they do go through that analysis. So our expectation when we have a staff report that says we're in support is that they've done that. They've circulated to Public Works and they've looked at it, and that they've come back with, you know, essentially, we're good with this. It's not going to cripple the system for this particular severance. But because it is a mature neighborhood, and you know, services, I don't know how long ago they would have been put in, and I'm not sure how, you know, maybe you're up for actually, as you know, services to be updated on you know, other parts of the neighborhood. It would be interesting to talk with city staff to find out where that is within the infrastructure master plan that they're working on right now, and how they're setting criteria, and whether or not intensification can, you know, is intensification, or how far can you push the limits maybe for your neighborhood. So it might be an interesting discussion to just explore that. We don't have the answers, and I don't believe Ms. Kelly would have that answer, but you raise a really good point. It's just, you know, for tonight, for this application, I can assure you that our expectation is that that's been looked at. All right, there's a number of other issues that you talked about. Precedents again. I didn't realize there was heritage homes in the area, so that adds to the uniqueness of the neighborhood for sure. So good comment to be adding. Does any of the committee members have any questions for Mr. Cook on this? No? All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Cook, for hanging in there, because it's. I think we're an hour, at least an hour into the public portion at this point. So thanks everyone for hanging in there. That's the end of my list, but I do see there are other people who have been hanging in. So, Mr. Denham, would you like to address the committee?
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. I am also a resident of the Revelstoke neighborhood, and I declined to sign a petition when it was being passed around in our neighborhood. It is the petition mentioned earlier opposing the severance. I am in support of the severance. My rationale for this is relatively straightforward. Canada and the world is in a climate crisis right now, and as we've seen in the past decade, climate change-caused events are occurring more frequently. Increasing density within existing neighborhoods is a great way to add additional units of housing without adding additional sprawl to a city. Per Ottawa's official plan and strategic directions, the city will manage growth by directing it to the urban areas where services already exist or they can be provided efficiently. The severance, I believe, falls into that category. We have, as many people have mentioned, existing services such as water and sewer and electricity down these roads. And as mentioned by the applicant, the size of the requested lots will be about the same size as other lots on this street, which should not preclude making use of those services. I do hear all the constraints and all the concerns around trees, and I wanted to sort of echo, we're doing our best to save several on our lot as well, despite their extremely poor condition. And frankly, at least one of them should probably have come down, and we're trying not to do that. However, at least in my mind, at the end of the day, adding more density, nearer to restaurants, nearer to grocery stores, is a really good way to reduce CO2 emissions and ensure that we're doing the best by ourselves and future generations. I did want to address as well, like it is correct, we don't have any commercial properties that I'm aware of in this neighborhood. It's possible someone's running something that I'm not aware of. However, shortly down Riverside is very bikeable and very walkable and very easy to get to everywhere from hairdressing appointments, groceries, and so on. And I have done so myself repeatedly. So in addition to all of that, I just wanted to say, I realize that there's a lot of concern around change of character in the neighborhood, and I can't say to have been here for 40 or 50 years. And so I'm obviously not going to speak on behalf of any of the other residents in this neighborhood. And I think something like this is a really good opportunity to sort of gently iterate on and make sort of small additive changes to a neighborhood. Some people on this call are probably aware of this, some others may not be. But if the province's current proposed changes go through, it would be well within the rights of the current property owner, once those changes have gone through, to tear down the existing house and build a by rights duplex or triplex with a single driveway on the lot, if that happens later next year. So frankly, I think I would prefer to have the layout subdivision go through and have two separate houses built instead of having a triplex with a single driveway. So in conclusion, I support the severance, and as I believe it was Ms. Honeywell that said earlier, I am excited to welcome additional neighbors to this neighborhood. And also I wanted to put a quick shout out to, I think it was Ms. Kingston that I mentioned, the controlled floodplain, someone with the basement that's flooded several times this year. Thank you very much for the chuckle. I appreciated that one greatly. I got an audible chuckle out of me. So thank you very much. And that is all the time that I was going to use.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Denham. Again, we always appreciate getting the other side of the discussion. So any questions for Mr. Denham? All right. Okay, was there anything? I was just trying to think. I do appreciate the comments, in particular, Mr. Denham, with regards to alternative modes of transportation. So something other than complete reliance on the vehicle. And I didn't realize that well, I guess if you're saying that it's close enough to get to Riverside to be able to, that it's walkable and cyclable, then that's good to hear as well. Okay. Yes, Mr. Denham.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the neighborhood itself doesn't have sidewalks. Once you get up to the Riverside intersection, there are protected bike lanes and sidewalks going all the way up through Mooney's Bay. And it is possible to, on protected or sort of areas where one is able to cycle, get from here down to the shopping center. I believe it's called River Gate, but I'm possibly forgetting the name of it. But there's restaurants and hairdressers and such in that area there. And that's only about a 5-minute bike ride.
All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward? Going once, going twice. All right. So the public portion of the meeting is closed, which means, folks, that if you hear something and you want to raise your hand and pipe in, That's gone. All right, we're done. So now it's the opportunity for the panel members to just deliberate on this, talk about, get maybe further clarification from Mr. Beckers at this point on maybe an element that we want to dig a little bit deeper into, but otherwise that's what we're doing at this point, and then we're going to go to a vote. So, Mr. Beckers, I'm going to give you, now that you've heard from quite a number of speakers, is there sort of 2 minutes to summarize some of the, or to maybe rebut some of the things that you heard?
Yeah, okay, I'll take a couple minutes to do that. I'm just looking at the slide 2. I don't know if you can bring that back up, or because
Your slide 2? Your slide 2?
Yes, my slide 2.
All right. Okay. Coordinators, let's see if we can do that, please.
Okay. I'm just our lot is 160 feet of frontage on Revelstoke. Very few other houses or lots in that neighborhood have that kind of frontage where they would be able to sever without variances. Our lot is very unique in that way. A lot of the lots along Dorothea on the north side, you'll see how they aren't very deep as well. Almost across that whole street, our properties are going to be larger in area actually than most of those ones on Dorothea on the north side. And there's looking at this, I went through the property. There's only 5 properties in this whole area that are capable of even doing any kind of severance, having that width, that road frontage to be able to sever without variance. So it's not something that's going to happen on a 100-foot lot where you can divide it into 2 50-foot lots. The zoning just doesn't support that. So I think people sound concerned that it's going to be the end all of this neighborhood to have 2 80-foot lots created, where there's a lot of 80-foot lots already. So I think maybe it's being blown out of proportion a little bit. I don't think they realize that these are 80-foot lots. They're not down to the minimum standard of 60-foot lot or smaller. That's pretty much all I'd like to say. I think they fit in perfectly with this neighborhood.
Mr. Beckers, that was actually a really good addition, because looking at this and based on your comments, I can see how that would be true. And it's not to say that somebody can't come in and try and demolish a house and then ask for fairly radical minor variance to allow for the additional severances. So the easy pickings, in other words, is essentially about 5 lots. After that, they're looking at probably minor variances in order to meet the frontage requirements or to reduce the frontage requirements. And from there, on top of that, then now you're really playing with a difference in terms of the comparison in lot sizes to others. So that was very good information for you to add here as a counter. So thank you for that. Any questions then by the committee? I just need the gallery view. Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Okay, so if no questions from Mr. Beckers on that, any comments or observations or anything you'd like to add before we go to a vote? Is it because it's getting late? We've been on this item for a while. Maybe that's what it is. Okay, well then, I think we can go to a vote on this application at this point then. So members of the committee, all those in favor of the severance application for this property at 185 Kamloops, all those in favor? All right, so for the record then, the decision is unanimous, as you could see. So all panel members are in favor of the severance. And I think, just for my own sake, I was not convinced that, and I think character of neighborhoods is an important thing to preserve. But I can tell you that I did not hear the evidence I was looking for to truly be able to understand what the impact on that character was going to be with regards to this particular lot. I understand your questions about precedents, but I think Mr. Becker's comments at the end were actually quite helpful in allaying some of the those, you know, floodgates are going to open, and it'll be the end of our neighborhood. So, and I think that that's why the committee essentially has sided with an approval on this application. So, but that said, I know it must be disappointing for a lot of you, but I'd like you to know that the panel doesn't really appreciate the amount of time and preparation that people have come in. You had presentations, which I think is terrific. You showed us pictures. It really is the provision of that additional information that enriches the discussion and our understanding of the application. So again, thanks so much, folks, for coming out and for sticking with us to just about 9 o'clock here tonight. So with that, then, Mr. Beckers, you're aware of all the conditions of approval.
Yes.
You're in support. You're accepting all of those.
Yes.
And you've heard all the comments from members in the neighborhood. So in some cases, I would suggest that you reach out. The hedge is a good example of one. The electrical is also a good example of one. So so we're going to wish you luck with that project, and